Is there ever an acceptable reason to go behind your loved one's back? My girlfriend Mindy is autistic, and when I first started dating her, she gave me the weirdest condition for being with her. I wasn't allowed to ride the subway. She told me a homeless drug addict jumped into the subway when she was little and killed her parents in front of her, and now the thought of a loved one going on them gave her panic attacks. My heart broke for her. So even though I took the subway to the gym every day and had no plans of stopping, I promised her I wouldn't for her peace of mind. For 3 years, I kept up the lie. Every morning, I'd kiss her goodbye, walk to the bus stop until she couldn't see me, then duck into the subway. 20 minutes to the gym, workout, 20 minutes back. Then 2 weeks ago, I saw her, my supposedly subway-terrified Mindy, walking through the turnstiles. I ducked behind a pillar, heart pounding. She wasn't panicking. She walked calmly to where the homeless vets sleep and handed one a coffee. He seemed so thankful when he drank it. At first, I thought it was so sweet of her to fight her fears to help homeless vets, but then the vet suddenly passed out. My jaw dropped. And it dropped even further when she started going through his pockets and pulled out his VA card and his benefits card. She placed them in her jacket, then stood up and walked along where she found 2 more veterans to do that to this morning alone. That's when I understood where her extra money suddenly came from. For months, Mindy had been contributing more to rent, buying expensive things, saying her online consulting was picking up. I went to the police that same day, but they said without proof of drugs or victims coming forward, they couldn't do anything. Document everything, they said. So I started following her. I had collected 23 videos of her at different stations committing the same exact pattern. But last week, something changed. Completely out of nowhere, she looked up while we were eating dinner and said, "My therapist thinks I'm ready for exposure therapy. Would you go with me to a subway station tomorrow? Just to stand on the platform?" My stomach dropped. Of course, baby. The next morning, she clung to my arm as we approached Union Station, the same station where I'd seen her drugging veterans. She was shaking and whimpering. "Let's just stand here for 1 minute," she sobbed. But through her performance, she was studying me. When the 8:15 pulled up, my train, she buried her face in my chest. "Does this train sound familiar?" "All trains sound the same, babe. I think." That night, she went through my phone while I showered. I keep the transit app hidden in a calculator folder, but she found something else. "Why does your Google timeline show you near stations every morning?" "The gym's above 1. GPS gets confused." She pulled up our bank statements. Daily $2. 90 charges at 6:15 a.m. Protein shake vending machine. I lied. She called the gym to verify, and thankfully they had one I didn't even know about. 2 days later, I was on my regular morning train when I saw her best friend Lisa board my car. I turned away and pulled my hood up immediately. That evening, Mindy asked, "Lisa said she saw someone who looked exactly like you on the subway this morning. Weird, right?" "Very weird." Soon, Mindy bought me a new gym bag with better compartments, but I found an AirTag sewn into the lining. I left the bag unused and kept using my old one. That's when she escalated the exposure therapy. "I need to ride 1 stop." She sobbed the whole time, but I felt her watching my hands, how I gripped the pole, how I shifted my weight in curves I knew by heart. When we approached my usual stop, I caught myself almost instinctively moving towards the door. She started setting her alarm for 5:45 a.m., pretending to turn it off and go back to sleep while I got ready. I caught her once following me to the door, watching which direction I turned. I turned towards the bus for looks. The next day, I found a mileage installed on my phone. When I confronted her, it was to track my fitness walks. But subway rides don't add miles like buses do. She was looking for discrepancies. Then yesterday, she stopped pretending completely. "I called your gym yesterday," she said suddenly at breakfast. My heart sank. "Oh yeah?" "Yeah. I asked them to check their systems, and they said you scan in every morning at 6:45. She then looked up at me. "But that's weird because you leave here at 6:15. Traffic's light that early. The gym is 15 minutes away by subway, 45 by bus." She was gripping her coffee mug so tight her knuckles were white. I mapped it. Silence. "Mindy, my therapist said I was paranoid. Said there's no way you'd betray my one boundary. The one thing I asked." Her voice was shaking now. "So I tested it. I had her assistant stand at the station yesterday at 6:15. I went stone cold. You walked right past her. Got on the 6 train I begged you never to take. Tears streaming now. 3 years. Every morning. You promised me. You take it too," I blurted out. She froze. "What?" "I saw you. 2 weeks ago. Union Station. You walked through the turnstiles like it was nothing. No panic attack. And you drugged those veterans." The color drained from her face. "And I have videos of you doing it," I told her. "So tell me which one is worse. Secretly taking the subway, or drugging and stealing from homeless veterans?" I stared at her intently. She was almost crying, before she stood up slowly and walked to the window with her back to me. "There's something I need to tell you. What she told me changed the rest of my life forever. She turned from the window, and her shoulders started shaking before she spoke. My dad wasn't killed by anyone. Her voice came out small and broken. He was a veteran who overdosed right there on the platform when I was 12. I stood frozen as she kept talking. My mom couldn't handle it and just left me with my aunt who barely wanted me around. The tears running down her face looked different from all the other times she'd cried. I learned pretty fast that big dramatic lies kept people from leaving. She wiped her nose with her sleeve. The subway story always worked to control boyfriends because who would leave someone with that kind of trauma? My stomach felt sick listening to her admit this. Every guy before you stayed longer when I told them about my dead parents and my subway phobia. She sat down on the couch and pulled her knees up to her chest. The tears in my eyes right now are real, but I get why you don't believe anything anymore. I watched her rock back and forth slightly. I started taking those veterans cards to feel powerful over people like my dad who picked drugs over family. Her voice got harder when she said this part. At first I told myself I'd return them, but then my aunt kicked me out when I turned 18 and I needed the money. She looked up at me with red eyes. I always meant to give them back eventually. I shook my head and pulled out my phone to show her one of the videos. That's not what I saw, Mindy. My hands were steady even though my insides felt like jelly. You were methodical and practiced, and you never showed any sign of planning to return anything. I scrolled through more clips showing her same routine at different stations. Look at yourself doing this over and over. She pushed the phone away and stood up fast. You wouldn't understand what it's like to be abandoned by everyone. Her voice cracked on the last word. My dad chose drugs, and my mom chose to run away, and my aunt counted the days until I was gone. She was pacing now with her arms wrapped around herself. You have no idea what that does to a person. I put my phone back in my pocket and took a deep breath. I'm not deleting this evidence. My voice came out calmer than I expected. And I'm going to find legal options that don't involve just walking away from this. She started crying harder and grabbed my arm. Please don't do this to me. Her grip was tight and desperate. I can't tell if you're manipulating me right now or if you're actually scared. I pulled my arm free gently. But either way, I have to do something about what you've been doing to those veterans. She ran to her room and slammed the door hard enough to shake the pictures on the wall. I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop with shaking hands. The search for transit police contacts took longer than it should have because I kept typing wrong. I found the main number and scheduled a meeting for that afternoon through their online system. My fingers moved on their own while my brain tried to process everything. The confirmation email came through right away with the address and meeting time. I saved it 3 times in different folders just to be sure. Then I picked up my phone and dialed the non-emergency line with my thumb hovering over the call button for a full minute. When I finally pressed it, the ringing sounded too loud in the quiet apartment. Transit Crimes Division. The voice was calm and professional. My name is Detective Franklin Riggs, and I specialize in these cases. I explained the basics while he typed on his end. I have videos of my girlfriend drugging and robbing homeless veterans at subway stations. Franklin's typing stopped for a second, then continued. How many incidents have you documented? I told him about the 23 videos from different stations. You need to stop following her immediately for your own safety. His tone got more serious. Preserve all those videos with proper timestamps and station locations. He gave me detailed instructions about creating backups. And absolutely do not warn her about this investigation, because that could endanger you and compromise our ability to help the victims. He explained how this could help multiple veterans get their benefits back. Your safety matters too, so please follow these instructions exactly. Then he transferred me to someone else. This is Carol Gupta from the VA, and I investigate benefits fraud. Her voice was kind but businesslike. Detective Riggs just briefed me on your situation. She asked specific questions about the cards I'd seen Mindy take. This involves federal crime since VA benefits are government property. The scope of what Mindy had done started hitting me hard as Carol explained the penalties. We need to move quickly to help these veterans who've lost access to their medications and food assistance. My chest felt tight thinking about all those people Mindy had hurt. That evening, I walked back to the living room where Mindy was sitting on the couch wrapped in a blanket. I need space to process all of this. She looked up with puffy eyes. I'm going to stay at my friend's place for a few nights. She jumped up and the blanket fell to the floor. Please don't leave me alone right now. Her hands reached for me, but I stepped back. I can't think clearly here and I need to figure out what to do. I went to our bedroom and packed a bag with enough clothes for a few days. She followed me and stood in the doorway crying. If you leave now, you're abandoning me just like everyone else. I zipped the bag and picked it up. That's not fair and you know it. I walked past her to the front door. I'll text you when I'm ready to talk. She grabbed the door frame like she might fall without it. Please don't go. But I opened the door and walked out into the hallway. The sound of her crying followed me to the elevator, but I didn't turn around. My friend's couch had never felt more like a safe place than it did that night. I woke up on that couch around 3 in the morning and couldn't get back to sleep. My laptop was still in my backpack, so I pulled it out and started going through all those videos I'd recorded of Mindy. Each file needed proper labels with the exact time and station location before I could send them to the cops. I opened the first video from 2 weeks ago at Union Station and watched her walk up to that first vet with the coffee cup. The timestamp showed 10:14 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. She moved so smoothly like she'd done this 100 times before. The vet drank the coffee and passed out within 30 seconds. I typed out the details in a spreadsheet while my stomach turned watching her go through his pockets. The second video was from the next day at a different station, and the pattern was exactly the same. Coffee, collapse, cards stolen, walk away. By sunrise, I had all 23 videos organized with dates, times, and station names in neat columns. My friend stumbled out of his bedroom around 7 and found me still at the kitchen table surrounded by notes. He made coffee without asking questions, and I appreciated him not pushing for details. Around 9, I Googled tenant rights lawyers and found a hotline number for people dealing with unsafe living situations. The woman who answered sounded tired but listened while I explained that I needed to break a lease because of safety concerns with my partner. She told me about something called constructive eviction, where you can leave if the apartment becomes unlivable or dangerous. She said to document everything and get a police report, which I already had started. She also mentioned I might be able to get a restraining order if things got worse. After hanging up, I spent another hour creating a secure cloud folder with all the evidence organized by date. I wrote up a detailed summary explaining what I'd witnessed and how long it had been happening. The send button seemed huge on my screen when I typed in Franklin and Carol's email addresses. My fingers stayed frozen over the mouse for what felt like forever. Finally, I clicked send and watched the progress bar slowly fill as 23 videos uploaded to their servers. My phone buzzed an hour later with a voicemail from Franklin saying he got everything and needed to meet tomorrow at the precinct. His voice was calm and professional, which helped me feel less crazy about this whole situation. He said to bring any physical evidence I had and be prepared to sign an official statement. Right after listening to his message, my phone lit up with a text from Mindy. It was this long, rambling message about how sorry she was for everything, but she never actually said what she did was wrong. She kept saying I didn't understand what she'd been through and how hard it was for her. She said her trauma made her do things she wasn't proud of, but that didn't make her a bad person. Part of me wanted to text back and tell her to get help, but I knew Franklin said not to contact her. I screenshot the message and added it to my evidence folder instead. The next morning, I took the subway to the precinct, which felt weird given everything that had happened. Franklin met me in the lobby and walked me to a small interview room with fluorescent lights that made everything look harsh. He had me write out everything I'd witnessed in my own handwriting while he asked clarifying questions. I handed over a USB drive with backup copies of all the videos, and he logged it into evidence with a case number. He treated me with respect and never made me feel bad about lying to Mindy about taking the subway myself. Carol showed up about an hour into our meeting and explained how serious this was for the veterans. She said when their VA cards get stolen, they lose access to medications that keep them stable. Some of them can't get food assistance for weeks while waiting for replacement cards. The shelter vouchers they need to stay off the streets become useless pieces of plastic. She asked if I noticed any patterns about which veterans Mindy targeted, and I told her about the Tuesday and Thursday morning routine. She wrote everything down in a small notebook and thanked me for coming forward. After leaving the precinct, I checked my email and found a message from Dr. Anastasia Edwards, who was listed as Mindy's therapist. The email was formal and careful with lots of legal language about confidentiality. She said she got my boundary-setting message, though I hadn't sent her anything directly. She couldn't discuss Mindy specifically, but urged me to create a safety plan and consider my own well-being. The whole tone made me nervous, like she knew something she couldn't say. That same afternoon, Lisa left me a voicemail that started angry, but got quieter as she talked. She said I was wrong about Mindy and that I didn't understand her like a real friend would, but halfway through her voice started shaking when she mentioned being worried about Mindy's recent behavior. She said Mindy had been acting strange lately and asking her to do things that didn't feel right. Even Lisa seemed to know something was seriously wrong, even if she wouldn't admit it directly. I spent the rest of that day going through my calendar and bank statements to create a timeline of everything. That's when the pattern jumped out at me so clearly, I couldn't believe I'd missed it before. Every Tuesday and Thursday morning around 10, Mindy had been hitting different subway stations in a specific rotation. She never went to the same station twice in a month, but cycled through about 8 regular spots. The whole thing was planned and organized, not some random emotional response to trauma like she wanted everyone to believe. The next morning, I walked out of my friend's apartment and almost stepped on a folded piece of paper that had been slipped under the door during the night. I recognized Mindy's handwriting immediately, those same careful loops she used for grocery lists and birthday cards. The note said she was scared of being alone, and that controlling people were the only way she knew to keep them from leaving her. My chest got tight reading it, but I folded it up and put it in my pocket without telling my friend about it. Around noon, Carol called and asked if I could come with her to find one of the veterans from my videos at a shelter downtown. I didn't want to face someone Mindy had hurt, but I knew it was important, so I agreed to meet her there in an hour. The shelter was this big brick building with metal bars on the windows and a line of people waiting outside for lunch. Carol showed her badge to the security guard, and we went inside where the smell of bleach and old coffee hit me right away. We found Dashiell Barr sitting at a plastic table in the corner eating soup from a paper bowl. When Carol showed him Mindy's photo on her phone, his whole body went stiff, and he put his spoon down slowly. He told us how he'd lost his benefits for 2 weeks after she took his cards and had to sleep outside in the cold because he couldn't get into any shelters without his VA paperwork. The quiet way he talked about it, not angry, just tired, made me feel worse than if he'd yelled at us. That evening, Carol emailed me her field notes to check if everything was accurate, and seeing it all written out in official language made everything feel more real than it had before. She'd typed up every detail about the videos, the dates and times, the station locations, and Dashiell's statement about losing his benefits. I spent an hour going through it and correcting small details like which turnstile Mindy used at each station. The next morning around 7, I heard knocking on my friend's building door, and when I looked through the peephole, I saw Mindy standing there with her arms wrapped around herself. I went outside instead of letting her up and suggested we go to the coffee shop on the corner if she needed to talk. She nodded and we walked there in silence, her staying a few feet away from me the whole time. At the coffee shop, she ordered her usual vanilla latte and sat across from me at a small table by the window. She started telling me she'd been returning some of the cards lately, just leaving them at the VA office with no explanation. Then she said maybe other people were involved, maybe some dealers who made her do it, but I could tell she was just making stuff up as she went along. I stayed quiet and let her talk, watching her hands shake as she lifted her coffee cup. Finally, I told her there was an active investigation, and she needed to get a lawyer right away. Her face went completely white, and she set her cup down so hard coffee splashed onto the table. She said I was destroying her life over a simple lie about the subway when she'd forgiven me for lying to her for 3 years. The whole thing felt so backwards I didn't know what to say, so I just stood up and left money for both coffees on the table. When I got back to my friend's place, there was a voicemail from Eli Lawrence, the therapist's assistant who'd spotted me at the station that morning. His message was all professional, giving me phone numbers for crisis hotlines and websites about safety planning when leaving a relationship. Just hearing someone talk about it like a real situation that had procedures and resources made me feel less alone in all this mess. Later that afternoon, Franklin called to tell me surveillance cameras had caught Mindy meeting 2 men at different stations over the past week. He couldn't tell if they were buying the stolen cards from her or if it was something else, but either way, it added another layer to worry about. He said they were working on identifying the men, but it might take a few days to get clear images from the old subway cameras. That evening, I went back to our apartment while Mindy was at her book club meeting that she never missed on Wednesdays. I changed all my passwords on my laptop, packed my important papers like my birth certificate and passport into a folder, and grabbed some things I couldn't replace like photos of my parents. The apartment felt different now, like walking through a museum display of someone else's life, instead of the place where we'd eaten breakfast together that same week. I packed everything into a backpack and left before she got home, making sure to lock the door behind me, even though part of me wanted to leave it open just to annoy her. 3 minutes after I got back to my friend's place, my phone buzzed with a text from Lisa, asking if we could meet because Mindy was having a really hard time and needed people who cared about her. I stared at the message for a while, knowing Lisa meant well, but also knowing I couldn't let myself get pulled back into their whole thing. I typed back that I needed space to deal with everything, and hoped she'd understand. Setting that boundary felt weird since Lisa and I had been friends too, but Franklin had been clear about keeping distance during the investigation. My phone lit up again 20 minutes later with a voice message from Mindy that I almost deleted without listening to. Something made me play it, though, and her voice filled my friend's living room admitting she'd sewn that AirTag into my gym bag because she needed proof I loved her enough to tell the truth. She went on for 3 minutes about how tracking me was the only way she could feel safe, how she knew it was wrong but couldn't stop herself, how her therapist said it was about control, but she thought it was about love. Listening to her explain the whole twisted logic behind it made my skin crawl, especially the part where she said she'd been planning to confront me with the tracking data at our anniversary dinner next month. The next morning, Franklin called with a new plan that he said might help everyone involved. He wanted to set up what he called a controlled handoff, where Mindy would bring any VA cards she still had and turn them over in exchange for the prosecutor maybe going easier on her. He explained it would happen at a public place with witnesses, but said I absolutely couldn't be there for safety reasons and to avoid any appearance of entrapment. I agreed immediately, grateful to not have to see her during something like that. 2 days passed before Franklin forwarded me part of a transcript from Mindy's recorded phone call with him about the handoff. Reading her words typed out was strange, seeing her agree to bring the cards, while still insisting over and over that she was the real victim in all this, that everyone was ganging up on her, that her dad's death and mom leaving meant she deserved understanding, not punishment. The transcript showed Franklin staying professional, just repeating the meeting details and legal requirements while she kept trying to explain herself. Her voice came through even in the typed words, smaller and more desperate than I'd ever heard it in our 3 years together. The handoff happened that Thursday at a coffee shop downtown that I'd never been to before. Franklin called me afterward to describe how Mindy showed up 10 minutes early with a manila folder tucked under her arm, ordered a small coffee, and sat at a corner table facing the door. When Franklin and Carol arrived, she pushed the folder across the table without saying much, just sat there looking tired and defeated while they counted 14 VA cards inside. Franklin said she didn't cry or argue, just signed the receipt for the evidence and left without finishing her coffee. Carol called me later that afternoon with an update that made my chest tight with mixed feelings. She'd already matched several of the cards to veterans who'd been trying for months to get replacement benefits, guys who'd been sleeping rough because they couldn't access their housing vouchers or medical prescriptions. She was starting the process to get them emergency reissues right away, which felt like the first actually good thing to come out of this whole mess. That tiny bit of relief didn't last long, though, because Mindy left me a voicemail that night that was nothing like the sad one from before. This time she was furious, screaming about how I'd set her up, how I was a liar and a coward who destroyed her life over some stupid train rides. She said she was going to tell everyone we knew about my 3 years of lying, post about it online, make sure all our friends knew what kind of person I really was. The threat felt almost silly compared to what she was facing with the criminal charges, but it still made my stomach hurt hearing her voice like that. I forwarded the recording to Franklin right away, and he called back within an hour saying I should document any contact from her and think about getting a restraining order if she kept it up. He said threats like that often happened when people realized they were really in trouble, but having official documentation would help if she escalated things. Having him take it seriously and offer real support made me feel less alone in dealing with her anger. The next week, I met up with Dashiell again at the same shelter where Carol and I had first found him. This time, he was expecting me, cleaned up and wearing a jacket that actually fit, looking more like the veteran he was than the homeless guy Mindy had targeted. Carol needed him to give a formal statement about exactly how losing his benefits had affected him, and he wanted me there since I was the one who'd come forward. We sat in a small office while he explained to Carol's recorder how he'd lost his spot in transitional housing, when his voucher stopped working, how he couldn't get his PTSD medication for 2 weeks, how he'd thought it was just government incompetence until Carol called him. When we finished, he shook my hand and thanked me for doing the right thing, which made me feel proud and guilty at the same time since I'd only acted after keeping my own secrets for so long. Later that evening, Lisa sent me screenshots of Mindy's Instagram and Facebook posts from the past few days. Vague things about being betrayed by someone she trusted, about learning who your real friends are, about surviving trauma that others couldn't understand. Our friend group was already commenting with hearts and support messages, asking if she was okay, offering to bring food or just listen if she needed to talk. Lisa said people were starting to ask questions about what happened, whether we'd broken up, if I'd done something to hurt her. Franklin had been clear that I shouldn't say anything about the investigation, so I just thanked Lisa for the heads up and stayed quiet while watching our mutual friends rally around Mindy online without knowing what she'd really done. The next morning, I walked into my office building earlier than usual and headed straight to HR on the 3rd floor. The receptionist looked surprised to see me, but buzzed me through to meet with the department head who'd handled my onboarding 3 years ago. I sat down across from her desk and explained that I might need time off for court dates related to a criminal case where I was a witness. She typed notes on her computer while I talked, asking if I was in any danger or needed security measures at work. I told her everything was handled by the police, but I wanted to be upfront about possible absences. She printed out forms for me to fill out about witness protection leave and assured me everything would stay confidential between us and my direct manager. Walking back to my desk felt strange knowing I was carrying paperwork about testifying in a case against someone I'd shared a bed with for 3 years. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with an email from Dr. Edwards offering to help arrange a mediated session just for practical separation logistics, making it clear this wasn't couples therapy, but just logistics. I read her message 3 times before responding that I'd appreciate help figuring out how to safely separate our lives. She scheduled us for Thursday morning at her office downtown. When Thursday came, I arrived 10 minutes early and sat in my car watching Mindy walk in first. I waited until exactly our appointment time before going inside where Dr. Edwards met me in the waiting room and walked me to a different entrance to her office. Mindy was already sitting in one of the chairs looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, like all the energy she'd used for performing had finally run out. Dr. Edwards sat between us with a notepad and started by setting ground rules about staying focused on practical matters only. Mindy agreed to remove the AirTag from my gym bag and promised to stop showing up at my friend's building unannounced. We went through our shared possessions item by item, dividing furniture and kitchen stuff while Dr. Edwards took notes about who would keep what. When we got to the photos on our walls, Mindy's voice cracked, but she kept going through the list. We agreed on a schedule for me to pack when she wouldn't be home, and Dr. Edwards wrote it all down for both of us. The whole thing took 45 minutes and felt like signing divorce papers, even though we'd never been married. 2 days later, I was at my friend's place when Franklin called to say they were serving a search warrant at the apartment right then. I could hear voices in the background as he explained they were seizing Mindy's laptop, phone, and any other electronics that might have evidence. He gave me the landlord's number, so I could coordinate changing the locks once they were done. I called the landlord, who sounded confused but agreed to meet me there in 2 hours with a locksmith. When I arrived, police tape was across the door, and neighbors were standing in the hallway whispering. The landlord let me in once the officers gave clearance, and I watched the locksmith change every lock while trying not to look at the mess the search team had left. Franklin called again that evening to say the assistant district attorney had reviewed everything, and Mindy would likely face charges, but might qualify for a mental health diversion program. He explained her documented autism and trauma history could mean treatment instead of jail time if she cooperated. Part of me felt relieved she might get actual help instead of just punishment, even after everything she'd done. The ADA wanted an updated statement from me, including context about Mindy's father and her abandonment issues to build a complete picture for the court. I spent 3 hours writing everything I knew about her childhood, her father's overdose, her mother leaving, being raised by an aunt who didn't want her. Franklin said this background would help the court understand the full situation without excusing the crimes she'd committed. Meanwhile, Carol called to say Dashiell had officially filed his complaint, and she was helping him get emergency reissue of his benefits while the case processed. She said seeing him get immediate help was the first positive thing in this whole mess, and I agreed completely. The next week, Mindy's lawyer sent a formal letter saying all communication should go through them from now on, officially ending any direct contact between us. Reading the legal language felt sad, but also brought unexpected relief, knowing I wouldn't have to navigate her messages anymore. I used the schedule Dr. Edwards had written to go pack my things from the apartment, bringing boxes I'd bought and a rental van. Each item I wrapped and packed felt like closing a chapter, especially the gifts we'd given each other over 3 years. I split the furniture fairly like we'd agreed, leaving her the couch she loved and taking the desk I'd bought. The whole process took 6 hours, and I left my keys with the landlord when I finished loading everything. That weekend, I had my first appointment with a therapist my insurance covered, sitting in her small office explaining how I'd gotten comfortable lying every single day. She asked questions about my pattern of deception and how Mindy and I had enabled each other's worst behaviors without realizing it. We talked about how my small lie about the subway had made me feel justified, ignoring her bigger lies when red flags appeared. She helped me see how we'd both created a relationship built on performance instead of truth. The session ended with homework to write down every lie I'd told in the relationship, no matter how small. 3 months dragged by with court dates and paperwork before the prosecutor finally called about Mindy accepting a plea deal for probation with mandatory therapy sessions twice a week, plus a payment plan to pay back the veterans she'd stolen from. The judge approved it that afternoon, and I sat in the back row of the courtroom watching her sign the papers with shaking hands, while her lawyer explained she'd avoid jail as long as she followed every requirement perfectly. Carol called me that night to say the first restitution checks had already gone out to victims, including Dashiell, who texted her a photo of the deposit slip he was using to secure an apartment after months on the streets. Seeing actual proof that something good came from this whole mess made the knot in my chest loosen for the first time in weeks. The ADA asked me to write an impact statement for the sentencing hearing, so I spent 3 nights typing and deleting drafts, trying to find the right balance between explaining how her lies and manipulation hurt me while still advocating for treatment instead of prison. My final version talked about her father's overdose and her mom abandoning her, and how those traumas shaped her need to control people, but didn't excuse drugging veterans who were already struggling. Mindy's therapist forwarded me a letter 2 weeks later, where she actually took responsibility for the surveillance and the AirTag, and following me without making excuses or blaming her autism or childhood. Reading her admit she was wrong without trying to manipulate me felt like the first honest thing between us in years. Lisa texted asking to meet at a coffee shop near my new place, and when she showed up, she looked exhausted and immediately started explaining how she'd suspected something was off, but didn't want to lose her best friend by pushing too hard about the weird behavior. We talked for 2 hours about how we'd both enabled Mindy in different ways, and she admitted she'd helped track me a few times thinking she was protecting her friend from being cheated on. Every morning now, I wait at the bus stop, even though the subway would get me to work 20 minutes faster, because I want to be honest with myself about my choices. The extra time on the bus gives me space to think about how easily I'd gotten comfortable lying every single day for 3 years. 5 months after everything exploded, Carol called to tell me they'd helped 6 more veterans recover stolen benefits, and asked if I could check one more time for any cards I might have missed while packing. I found one tucked in an old jacket pocket that I'd worn the day I first saw Mindy at Union Station, and drove it straight to Carol's office, feeling like returning it was a tiny way to help fix the damage. Looking back at everything now, there's no neat ending where we all learned perfect lessons and everyone's better off. But real change did happen with people getting help they needed, and both of us finally living without the weight of constant lies. Thanks for riding along with me through all those twists and turns. Definitely felt like a whole journey just wondering about things together. Can't wait to do it again next time. Like the video, it helps more than you think.